But today we've got someone very special here with us, the amazing Sarah Davis. So can we give her a big round of applause? So Sarah is the absolute oil that makes this church go together. I know a little bit about oil, isn't that right, Howard? It is so important for your car, you need to give it some oil. But she does so much for this church. She is behind the scenes, she makes everything work. She's our financial guru, she is administrator extraordinaire. There's so many things about her that are incredible. And I've known Sarah since 2019 when I first came to this church. And I've just known her to be such an integral and faithful woman of God. She stands for what's right, and I just think it's so amazing about her. So we get the incredible opportunity to hear from her first. She is not one to take the limelight ever, but it's so awesome that you've come up here to share. So let's give her one last clap. She's incredible. So as I said, we've been having a few testimonies about the faith journey, and I'd like to ask you a question. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your faith journey? How did you discover God, and what did your search for him look like?
Yes, so good morning, everybody. So for me, I had the privilege of being brought up in a Christian family. So I grew up going to church and hearing about God, which was like amazing. I know that not everybody has that opportunity. And then for me, I really had the search of faith for myself, probably when I was about 16, 17, hitting the teenage years of everything I've heard about God. But what does this look like for me personally, and not just from what I've heard from church, from family, and through that whole community. So for me, that was probably the linchpin of, am I actually going to follow everything that I've heard? Do I actually believe what I say I believe? And then, like they say, the rest is kind of history, and many opportunities through life to continue to grow my faith and my relationship with God from there.
Thank you, that's awesome, well done. Secondly, I know you a little bit, Sarah, and I know you're going to share about this, but I understand you've struggled majorly with your health over the many years. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and how God's really used that to grow your faith in him?
Yeah, so back in 2010, so a while ago now, I actually got diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. So what was happening was that my immune system randomly decided to start attacking my blood. So what it meant is that your platelets, which causes your blood to clot, my immune system was actually destroying them faster than I was creating them. So kind of like normal people, your minimum's about 120 or 150. The day I went in and got diagnosed, I had a platelet count of 1. So if I knocked myself, if I hurt myself, I was going to bleed, and I wasn't going to stop bleeding. So I was 23, and it was quite scary when they say, this is what's happening to you. We can't tell you why. There's no cure for it. You've just got to hope for the best. Basically, we can try and treat it and see what happens. So over about 6 months, I went through about 3 different courses of treatment because nothing was working, and then they ended up putting me on a very new, unknown treatment, and we don't know the long-term effects of that either because nothing else was working. And so I went on that treatment, which kind of kept me out of the woods, but not really. It meant that if I was ever, I was playing basketball at the time, and I was told I couldn't play it anymore because if I got a basketball to the head or anywhere, I would bleed, and where normal people would just clot and get on with life, I probably wouldn't clot and have a lot of issues. Anyway, so I did the journey through many different doctor's appointments, many different treatments, and nothing was working. But I remember, I think it was when I first got diagnosed, I just immediately got the story, and it's in both the books of Mark and Luke, I think, about the woman with the issue of blood. And it just kind of like hung around in the back of my head, and just like sat there as like a story that I knew God was faithful, and even if I never got better, that doesn't change God being faithful. So in 2016, I was doing a discipleship course we had here, and in some prayer time, I just felt a word from God to stop taking medication, which is a big thing to do when you've been sick for so long and the risk is very high. So I actually went and saw my specialist. I was like, so I want to stop taking medication. And she's like, not the best idea you've had, Sarah. I said, look, can we just give it a go? Like, if it doesn't work, like, you can keep tabs on me. If it doesn't work, we'll go back on it. But I really want to just feel to stop taking medication. So she's like, okay, that's fine. Here is the script for something to take because you're going to crash and not be great. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And I haven't taken medication since that date. Now, my levels were not great still, but it was enough to keep me out of medication. And then at the end of 2019, when I went back for a regular checkup, she's looking at my levels and she's like, Sarah, I don't know what's happened, but you're like down the bottom of what it is to be okay. So we're going to say that you're in remission. I was like, sweet, awesome, this is great. I can like semi-be normal, but I still wasn't in normal levels, so that's why they'll only go remission. And then I went back to the specialist 2 weeks ago because they like to see me yearly, and she prints off my results. And she's like, I don't know what's happened. I'm like, what are you talking about? Just lay it out for me. And she says, your level's at 190. So I would struggle to get over 100. And I was like, okay, what does this mean? And she said, I think it means that you're cured. I was like, what?
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So she was like, I don't want to say this because this never happens. You have this, you have it for life. You just manage it as best as you can. And I was like, okay, all right, so where to from here? She's like, well, this doesn't usually happen. So she puts parameters in place because she doesn't really think it's going to hold. But I believe it does. Yeah. And the really cool thing that just it kind of reinforces the faith is that when I first got diagnosed, like I said, I had the story of the woman with the issue of blood, and she had had it for 12 years. So this year is actually my 12th year since I was diagnosed, which just the thought that God prompted me with 12 years ago, that he fulfilled that even though I didn't know back then that was his plan, that was his promise to me to have fulfilled 12 years later after a massive journey, which if you know anybody or if you have a chronic illness, especially when it's not visible, it's a long and hard journey with a lot of working through your faith with God of what he's saying and what you read in scripture versus what is your reality here, of having like bleeding and not being able to stop, but God is faithful. And then literally 2 weeks ago getting the all clear that the specialist doesn't know what to do with that, which is pretty cool.
That's amazing. Well done. Thank you, Sarah. I've got one more for you. It's really, really good. I loved the point that you made around when you first got diagnosed and first had that problem. You said it didn't change anything between you and God. It didn't change who God was. It didn't change anything like that. So I think that's an incredible encouragement to us. You know, regardless of the circumstances, it doesn't change anything about who God's character is and who he is. But I'd like to ask you, what encouragement maybe do you have for the church now, based on your story, your testimony? What encouragement could you give to the people out here?
I think it's come up a few times through the faith series that when God promises us or tells us stuff, it doesn't always work out how we think it will. I thought I'd be fine within 12 months and then 12 years later. So just encourage you that anything that maybe you're struggling with God or something that doesn't make sense, just to stick it out because he always comes through. And to be open to something a bit different, because I think I got caught up in this is what it's going to look like, and that kind of stopped me from seeing what God was actually doing in moments throughout the journey. So just, really encourage you that the way that God outworks his promises is not how we think he will. And it always works out in a different, and you can see just so much of who God is when you go through his way and not trying to force your own way and your own resolution.
That's amazing. Yeah, well done, Sarah. Let's give her one last round of applause. Incredible testimony. Sorry, thank you.